What the is this piece of
Hi, welcome to today's episode of Age Analysis. In order to better understand the discussion that will be held in today's video, we highly recommend you to first watch our previous video, posted just before this one, Hatta Yoichi, Japan's Most Wanted Man. And for our subscribers who have indeed watched our first video, please move right over to 1 minute 8 seconds of the video in order to save time. But for our new viewers who may have not, if we are to just really briefly summarize the case, a man by the name of Hatta Yoichi, an already convicted criminal who was serving a suspended sentence for a crime that he committed in 2021, crashed into two university students with his car at almost 100 kilometers an hour on June 29, 2022, in the city of Beppu, Oita prefecture. While one of the students, B, managed to survive despite serious physical injury, the other student, A, could not, and tragically passed away from the crash. Hatta Yoichi ran away from the scene and has been in disappearance ever since. Now, after the first video was uploaded, we have received various comments from our subscribers. Thank you all for commenting, by the way. We know it sounds cliche, but all of your comments really do mean a lot to us, and we appreciate every single one of them. And with that said, quite a number of comments that we have received on our first video were ones in the lines of such on screen as of now, leaning towards the general idea that Hatta has most likely took his own life when he arrived at the Beppu Kitama Yacht Harbor, and such are absolutely valid opinions, as after all, Hatta was indeed captured for the last time ever, as far as we know, on a CCTV installed near the Beppu Kitama Yacht Harbor, which recorded him jaywalking across a road, and the t-shirt that Hatta was wearing on the day of the crime was found right on the concrete floor on the Kitama Yacht Harbor, leading some of our subscribers to further speculate that Hatta could have indeed just took off his shirt, then jumped into the sea and ended his life right then and there. But then, a valid question that we've observed from our comment section is, if Hatta is indeed still alive, how on earth did he avoid being caught on security cameras across Beppu during his escape from the Kitama Harbor Point onwards? And if he did successfully get out of Beppu and then the Oita prefecture at large, how is he not spotted in any of the security cameras across Japan throughout all this time? I mean, as one of our subscribers have commented, this is Japan and there's CCTV everywhere, so it will be near impossible to up and vanish. So let us first explain in depth on why experts of this field in Japan, such as former Tokushima police detective Akiyama Hiroyasu, who spent his entire life chasing after fugitives and criminals, is currently fully convinced at the idea that Hatta successfully escaped from the Kitama Harbor Point onwards and most likely got out of Beppu and the Oita prefecture within the first 24 hours after fatally crashing into victims A and B with his car. Now, after running away from the immediate crime scene and arriving at the Beppu Kitama Yacht Harbor, an area of Beppu where there's not a lot of people nor surveillance cameras, former officer Akiyama believes that Hatta first took off his shirt, not because he wanted to dive into the sea, but because his t-shirt was just an overall hindrance to his subsequent escape process. In order to initially get to the Beppu Kitama Yacht Harbor, Hatta jogged across literally the busiest area in all of Beppu with the most amount of CCTVs, the area surrounding Beppu Station. Hence, Hatta was most likely well aware of the fact that he was captured multiple times on security cameras around Beppu Station wearing the overfit black t-shirt. So former officer Akiyama states that Hatta, being worried about the existence of CCTV footages that captured him running away while wearing the black t-shirt, not to mention physical eyewitnesses, first took off his shirt at the harbor, then quickly thought of the next stage of his escape. But then we may think, but would it not be weirder and make you stand out even more if you get seen as a shirtless man running? However, this is where the cleverness of Hatta Yoichi comes in. If spotted shirtless anywhere else around the city, he would have indeed been seen as a rather weird young man running naked around the city, leading to more memorable witness reports. However, the place where he took off his shirt was the Kitama seaside area, where first of all, there is rarely anyone there to begin with, especially at night. But most people who are there visit the area in order to walk and jog next to the sea, and given that Hatta committed his crime during the summer, if some people there, if any, saw Hatta running, they probably would have thought that he was just a young man jogging shirtless next to the beach. And please guess where we arrive at if we go straight up north alongside the sea from the Kitama Harbor, Hatta's home. Now, on the map, Kitama Harbor is located here, while Hatta's home is said to be located around here in the Hijimachi area. Japanese media source Abema speculated that if Hatta ran from the Kitama Harbor to his home along the sea line, he would have reached home by around 9:30 p.m., 1 hour and 45 minutes after he hit victims A and B with his car. Former officer Akiyama states that he's very confident that Hatta, anxious to get out of the Oita prefecture, probably came to the realization that he needed money in order to do so ran towards his home in order to prepare money and belongings for himself, then got out of the Oita prefecture. Now, where Hatta headed towards after he got out from his house becomes even more of a speculation at this point. But one plausible theory that is going around in Japan is that after Hatta gathered money and belongings from his house, he then left towards the nearest station from his home, which was Hiji Station. Then the theory goes that from Hiji Station, he took the late night train which headed towards Kokura Station. The reason behind this speculation is that Hiji Station is indeed literally the closest station from Hatta's home, and how the late night trains heading towards Kokura Station after 10 p.m. from Hiji Station usually has almost no one riding the train at that time. Now, some may justifiably think it is still a station though, must still have quite a number of eyes. But then, we wanted to take this time to correct a certain misconception that many outside of Japan seem to possess regarding the island nation. This misconception is created for perfectly good and understandable reasons. When many people around the world think of Japan, they usually first think of the images of the jam-packed Shinjuku station or the equally densely packed Shibuya crossing, gradually establishing this subconscious notion that wherever you go in Japan, there is always going to be, how can we describe this, a certain baseline level number of people in a given area. And this conception will be further corroborated to a degree when one actually visits Japan, as when individuals from other countries visit Japan, the vast majority of people will head to the big cities in the likes of Tokyo, Osaka, or Nagoya, and not a mostly unknown area on the Kyushu island, such as Hiji. But then with that said, please have a look at these photos of Hiji Station. Yeah. And please keep in mind that these are all photos taken during the middle of the day, meaning that the chances of anyone being at the station waiting for a train is exponentially lower in between 10 p.m. to midnight. Even the tickets are bought from a machine and not from a staff of a kind working at the train station. This means that if Hatta was to have went to Hiji Station, as speculated by Japanese media sources such as Abema, to take the late night train to Kokura Station sometime in between 10 p.m. to midnight, there is more than a high chance that he could have been able to get this done without a single eyewitness. Or if there were eyewitnesses who saw Hatta, it is still very likely in the number of single digits. And if Hatta was all hooded up and masked on, with his head down, how could anybody possibly tell that it was him, right? But then, this leads to a few subsequent questions. First, what was the Oita Beppu police doing during all this time? If we remember correctly, Hatta left his wallet with all of his identifications inside his car, meaning that the Oita Beppu police knew exactly how Hatta looked like, as well as where he lived, just minutes after he began running away from the crime scene. So if we think of ourselves as the police officers, what would we have done? We know where he lives and how he looks like. Then we believe that it is not that hard for us to come to some of the more immediate conclusions regarding the type of action that we promptly have to take in order to not let Hatta run away and escape further away from the Oita prefecture. And one of such actions is to obviously dispatch some police officers at the nearest train stations from his home, as well as the roads around his house. But then, it is highly likely that the officers from the Oita Beppu police station did not do any of this. First, we still cannot believe how this is even possible, but the fact of the matter is that it took 2 days for the Oita Beppu police to even visit the Kitama Yacht Harbor and find Hatta's black t-shirt. 2 days. 2 days required to even know that Hatta joked down to the Kitama harbor from the crime scene, despite the number of CCTV footages and eyewitness testimonies, and actually bother going down there. The father of victim A said in an interview that for the first 3 days after the hit and run, the police did not inform the victim A's family of anything regarding the investigation. Then after the 3 days, when the police finally opened their mouth, they just told the victim A's family, "We found who the owner of the car was, so we did go to his house." However, we still do not know for sure of whether the car owner is the person who crashed into and killed their son. So this effectively means that at least for the initial 3 days after the hit and run has occurred, the Oita Beppu police did not even know for sure of whether Hatta was even the right suspect whom they should be chasing after. So under such evidence and circumstances, it is highly unlikely that the officers at the Oita Beppu police station dispatched police officers in the near stations to Hatta's house, such as Hiji Station, in the immediate few hours after Hatta committed the crime. If it took them 2 days to even know that Hatta jogged towards the Kitama harbor after crashing into A and B with his car, and 3 days or more for them to even fully confirm that it was indeed Hatta who was the culprit behind the wheel, and that he was indeed the right suspect to be chasing after. In fact, when the Oita Beppu police was pressured by the Japanese media and the general public to reveal their initial investigation records, which would show what they actually did during the first few hours and days after the crime has occurred, this is what they showed to the journalists. We're not joking, by the way. This is literally what they showed. Imagine yourself as the journalist from Tokyo, going all the way down to Japan's southernmost island of Kyushu in order to visit the Oita Beppu police station, as they said that they are finally ready to disclose their initial investigation records. You arrive at the police station after a flight or a long train ride, eagerly anticipating on the type of new information that will be contained within the police investigation reports that could potentially assist towards the finding of Hatta Yoichi. Then they show you this, an investigation report fully blacked out, with not a single piece of information available. We believe it's probably hard for us to even fully fathom just how flabbergasted the journalists must have been when the police showed them this.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
And may have even thought that the officers were pranking. But then, the black cover-up on the investigation report document never came off. So then, why did the Oita Beppu police pull off this extremely shady act when they knew that this was going to be televised to the entire Japanese public? As some Japanese journalists have suggested, it is obviously to cover up the truth of the matter that the officers at the Oita Beppu police station basically did absolutely F-all during the initial investigation stages of finding Hatta Yoichi.
警察の初動ミスを認めたっていうことに受け取るんですけど、その辺はいかがでしょうか。初動捜査のミスですね。
その点はちょっとコメントを控えさせていただきます。
どうして控えるんですか。
私が答えるちょっと立場にないということで。
As if they have indeed done what they were supposed to do and have nothing to hide, then why cover up every single part of their investigation report, even to the very last word? Most likely, as they know themselves, that they did not do what they were supposed to do. Victim A's father said that he now even doubts whether there was even such a thing as an initial investigation to begin with to find Hatta Yoichi by the Oita Beppu police. But rather than apologizing to the victim A's family for not doing their task properly during the first few hours and days to catch Hatta, they're still, even to this day, maintaining the attitude of having their head up high, never apologizing, and if a question comes at them that might put them in a difficult spot, just reply back with a no comment. The Oita Prefectural Police did not even want Hatta Yoichi to be in the nation's most wanted list. They wanted to perfunctorily look for him for a few weeks, just under the mere charges of a traffic law violation, then get this case done and forgotten with. However, the family of victim A is not stupid. They progressively realized that nothing much was being done by the officers at the Oita Beppu police station, so took the matter into their own hands by actively contacting various media outlets across Japan and made sure that the death of their son gets known nationwide, and let the Japanese public know that the suspect who murdered their one and only son has not yet been caught. So when Hatta's hit-and-run crime became national news and ignited anger from much of the Japanese public, then the Oita Prefectural Police finally began doing what is being done now, putting Hatta on Japan's most wanted list, give out his wanted poster in different train stations. You guys know the drill. Put out that facade that they're doing something. So we emphasize once again that scenarios such as Hatta taking the late-night train from Hiji Station to Kokura Station are all still speculations when it comes to our attempts to consider the different places that Hatta may have went to, and are by absolutely no means definite. But at the same time, we do not have to be rocket scientists to know that it must have been extremely easy for Hatta to run away from Beppu, then most probably out of the Oita Prefecture at large during the initial hours after his crime, with no chase or obstruction by the police whatsoever, allowing Hatta to basically do whatever he wanted to do. So yeah, if Hatta was still not found, despite an intense, thorough investigation by the police, then the theory that he took his own life could gain much more credibility, as if he did not, he should have been caught. But the people in Japan, fully knowing that Hatta was basically just given a free pass to walk out of the prefecture for the first few days after his hit-and-run crime, and just go to wherever he wanted to go in Japan. It is very hard for anyone to say he would have been arrested by now if he was still alive. But then, the final question still has to be asked. How on earth did Hatta manage to not get caught on CCTV cameras across Japan, other than just the initial few sightings captured of him in the immediate few minutes after his crime on his way to the Kitama harbor? Now, we would like to first state that this is indeed very unusual, and there's still no definitive answer that can explain how Hatta evaded CCTV spottings on an absolute basis. But with that said, let us begin answering this question by first going back to what the Oita Beppu police officers told the victim A's family 3 days after their son passed away. And their statement was, "We found who the owner of the car was, so we did go to his house. However, we still do not know definitively of whether the car owner is the person who crashed into your son." I mean, how is this even possible? With Japan being largely thought of as a country on an international basis as the super high-tech, surveillance camera-filled nation.
We just entered a convenience store with nobody working here, but there's about 70 cameras on the ceilings. Do you think somebody's looking at us right now?
I think so.
Many outside of Japan may rightfully come to the immediate guess that there must have been a CCTV installed at the traffic light where the crash occurred, clearly capturing the face of Hatta Yoichi inside the car, and of him initially running away from the scene barefoot. But the thing is, there was not. There was not a single public surveillance camera placed in the vicinity of the crash by a public entity such as the local prefectural government. This footage of victim A and B's motorbikes flying across the road was thankfully recorded by a security camera that was installed privately at an apartment building for the private security reasons of the building residents, such as theft prevention and recording of intruders coming in. This means that without this apartment's private security camera, we would not have been able to understand just how severe the impact of the hit was for the victims A and B. And let us just briefly consider some of the CCTV footages that captured Hatta on the day of his atrocious crime. This footage of Hatta purchasing a cup few hours before his crime, a private security camera installed by the store. This footage of Hatta walking towards the Yamanote shopping mall complex minutes before his crime, private security camera installed in a parking lot around the Yamanote-cho shopping mall area. And most of the CCTV footages that captured Hatta while he ran towards the Kitama harbor are all video recorded in literally the busiest area of all of Beppu, where the vast majority of shops and restaurants are concentrated upon, the area around Beppu station. And in this case, some of the CCTVs installed may indeed be public surveillance cameras installed by the local government, as Beppu station is indeed the transportation hub of Beppu, where the concentration of people is high, if not the highest in the entire region. But then given that he was walking across the busiest area of the entire city of Beppu, where many stores and restaurants are densely placed in, one would think that there should have actually been more than just 4 CCTV video recordings of him made in the area. Hatta was not going around in alleyways or anything of that nature. He mostly walked and jogged across the main roads. So if CCTV installations are a relatively rare thing to see, even around the central station of the city, this effectively tells you that in locations around Japan, where the concentration of people are low, public surveillance cameras are even more unlikely going to be installed by the respective local governments. This obviously applies more to the sparsely populated tourist towns such as Beppu, or the rural villages of Japan outside of the big cities such as Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, and the likes. And if that non-urban spot also does not have shops in the likes of convenience stores or restaurants or apartment buildings in the vicinity, forget about CCTVs, as there is no private interest to be protected, which for the convenience store would be to protect the store from potential shoplifters. For the higher end apartments would be to protect the residents from burglars and intruders, etc. There's obviously not going to be any privately installed security cameras around the area. And such a location that fits this criteria perfectly are places such as public parks, or as in the one in Beppu Kitama, where Hatta is theorized to have used to head north to his house, seaside pedestrian pedestrian-only streets created for walking and exercise purposes. So from a holistic standpoint, we really do have to ask, why is there such a relative dearth of CCTVs, especially a lack of publicly installed surveillance cameras across Japan put in place by a non-private entity such as the local government? There are a number of reasons for this. First is privacy. Back when I was a university student in Japan, one of the things that surprised me the most was that regardless of how tiny each of the rooms were inside the dormitory, every student was given their own room to live in, rather than sharing a bigger room with a roommate. And such is just one of the myriad examples of how individual privacy, both in the public and private life, is emphasized to quite a strong degree in Japan than what many would normally expect from such a densely populated country. Hence, a number of citizens in Japan actually oppose the installation of surveillance cameras in public spaces, even if it could contribute towards combating crime to a degree. There are many examples of this, but let us just provide you with a few. On March 7th, 2020, there was a public protest held at Mitake Park, located at none other than Shibuya, by a human rights group which mainly works for the rights of the homeless. They opposed the installation of 4 surveillance cameras that were being planned to be placed by the Shibuya city office at the park prior to the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. They said that they took the stage in order to protest against a serious violation of privacy rights caused by the Shibuya city office and their installation of the surveillance cameras. And for this we can say, okay, fair enough. As this human rights group have claimed, parks should be public areas that anyone can utilize with complete freedom. However, the installation of the new surveillance cameras means that the citizens' actions are being observed, which violate the people's privacy. But then, with that said, when new public surveillance cameras are set to be installed in areas of Japan where their placement seems to be much more necessary and justified for the sake of crime prevention, the local ward office and the police of the respective jurisdiction still have to regularly receive voices of opposition. For instance, in 2014, when the Osaka Prefectural Police announced their plans to increase the number of public surveillance cameras inside the Airin-chiku, an area of Osaka quite notorious for its reputation as an area with a higher crime rate, there was a large opposing voice from the local people who resided in this rather controversial neighborhood of Osaka, and from actual Osaka-based lawyers such as Okawa Kazuo. To quote Attorney Okawa's words, "I am opposed to the proposed increase in the number of security cameras, which I can only see as a violation of the rights to privacy and a disregard for justice. And many wards within certain cities and towns of Japan has a strict policy that has to be followed before security cameras can be installed by a public entity. If we dig into perhaps the most boring side of the Japanese internet, which are the Japanese government papers, we can see that the Chiyoda city office, which represents the Chiyoda ward of Tokyo, for instance, literally has a policy paper regarding the installation of security cameras inside the Chiyoda ward. And some of the rules that any local organization of the ward, whether it be the Chiyodaku police, the neighborhood association, etc., has to follow are ones such as being required to hold an explanatory meeting in advance in front of the local residents regarding the proposed installation and operation of security cameras at the desired location and obtain consent from the local residents. And we do not have to be rocket scientists to know that while a large number of the local residents, without doubt, will welcome the installation of larger number of public surveillance cameras for crime prevention purposes, there are more than likely still going to be citizens who will raise privacy concerns and make it just a harder process for a public entity such as the local police station within the ward to obtain the required consent from its local residents. But with that said, while privacy concerns and pressure from the residents to limit the number of public surveillance cameras may indeed be the reason why there are not as many public CCTVs deployed in Japan, it is not the only reason, especially in the non-large city regions. If you're from Japan or have lived in Japan for a long time, you'll viscerally notice one thing on a daily basis. And that reality is that Japan, as technologically advanced as it is in many areas of the private sector, when it comes to how a public entity such as the local ward office, post office, law enforcement agency such as the prefectural police, or just any organization that goes through a bureaucratic procedure to get things done, still relies so much on the analog way of doing things, such as through a mountain of paperwork, stamps, fax machines, and the likes. And it's just simply, at least not yet as of current in 2024, not fond of implementing updated technology to get matters done, at least compared to many other OECD nations. Let us not get it wrong, Japanese public entities are still very, very thorough, and this is something that we should definitely appreciate. But when it comes to the need for speed, especially in a process such as the initial initial investigation of chasing after a murder suspect, just being thorough is simply not enough. For both speed and accuracy of the police investigation, the use of technology is very much necessary, which is something that is still quite alien to many police stations around Japan, especially the ones in smaller cities and towns, such as Beppu, needless to mention even the smaller rural villages. I mean, we just saw firsthand on how the Oita Beppu police had to rely so much on privately installed CCTVs, rather than the ones installed by themselves, whether it be from the nearby apartment building security cameras, or the private security camera from a konbini, to procure recorded CCTV footages of Hatta Yoichi on the day of his crime. And for us who have lived in Japan for a long time, this is not a surprise at all, as we know that CCTVs in Japan are something that is mostly installed inside convenience stores, or at the front of our apartments, and the likes, and just not much on the streets by a public entity, such as the region's police, or the local city or town office, for the sake of surveillance. Thus the reason why you just quite never see a comment in the Japanese side of the internet of a statement in the lines of how Hatta Yoichi must have been caught by a CCTV by now if he was still alive. And Hatta, obviously being Japanese, and naturally knowing these aspects about the reality of where these CCTVs are usually placed around Japan, will make sure that he stays far away from private business establishments such as convenience stores, restaurants, and the likes, as well as higher-end apartments or houses when going around, in order to not get caught on a potential private CCTV. And if he does have to go past such areas, he'll most likely make very sure that he stays all hooded up and mask on. So what are some of the important takeaway implications of today's video? First, when you're traveling in Japan, especially in the non-big city regions of the country, please have at least some sense of guard and caution, such as geo-sharing your location with a family member using the Google Maps app on your smartphone. Or if there seems to be a shady person following you, keep an eye on them and even be ready to call the police, rather than naively thinking, Japan is so completely safe. That guy will mean no harm, even if he has been going on the same path as me for the past 2 kilometers. Let's absolutely not get this twisted. Japan is very much a safe country in most standards for tourists, as well as for living here in general. So for any of our subscribers watching this video, please do not let this video deter you from visiting Beppu in the near future. As we've mentioned in our first video on Hatta Yoichi, Beppu is just such a beautiful place to visit, with the best onsens, at least from our subjective viewpoint, in all of Japan. Like, we can share so many stories about Beppu, as this was the place that Helen and I loved visiting, starting from 2015 from Tokyo, whenever we had the time and financial means to do so, to visit there as a holiday. We just love Beppu, but this also means that I could have very much been the one who walked past Hatta Yoichi while I went to buy some groceries at the Shinsen Ichiban in the Yamanote-cho shopping area. It could have been any one of us, showing you that while Japan is probably one of the safest countries on earth, to also vehemently believe that every single person in the country is sane and nice is like covering our eyes with our 2 hands at 1 p.m. and attempting to persuade everyone else that it's nighttime. Weird analogy, but yeah, maybe I need to get some sleep. But anyways, the truth of the matter is that if you encounter an already convicted criminal in Japan, such as Hatta, especially in a rural city, town, or village, I mean, you've seen it through this case of Hatta Yoichi, you could be on your own. The police may not immediately come running to your aid. Well, at least in jurisdictions such as Beppu, covered by police departments such as the Oita Beppu police, thinking that the criminal who committed the offense against you is going to get caught soon on an absolute basis is also a mistake, as if the offender does not walk past an apartment building, convenience store, etc., where private CCTVs exist, the offender can indeed just get away without being recorded on security cameras. And the lack of public surveillance cameras in the more countryside, non-big city type areas of Japan is not only a limiting factor for catching criminals, but also for finding us if we ever get lost by ourselves, or even worse, be victimized to a potential crime. To provide one instance, on June 8th, 2023, a South Korean tourist by the name of Yoon Se-jun just went completely missing in Kushimoto, Wakayama Prefecture. His disappearance was particularly mysterious, as after sending a message to his sister back for the last time at 9:33 p.m., he went missing and still has not been found to this day. The only CCTV footage left of him on the entirety of the day that he went missing was from, you guessed it, a konbini security camera in Kushimoto, Now, if there were better public surveillance camera installations across the Wakayama prefecture, then the chances of finding Yun could have been higher, and so many of the good residents from the area who last saw Yun stepped up and contributed towards the search, such as explaining in detail on when and where they last saw and talked to him.
6月の8日やったと思います。16時32分。
暗かったし、黒っぽい見えたけどね、嘘もね。雨しょぼしょぼしちゃう時郵便局のところに置いたからね、その時間帯に。
And even creating YouTube videos to inform others that if anyone used to have any information on him, to immediately contact the Wakayama Prefectural Police.
行方不明になっているのは26歳の韓国人男性ユン・セジュンさん。
And talking about the Wakayama Prefectural Police, although some of the actions in which they took during their search for Yun, such as searching the area through helicopter, definitely has to be acknowledged and appreciated, there are still parts of the initial police investigation for Yun that leaves much to be desired, especially when it came to their application of technology to find the missing tourist. We believe that for the police departments of many countries, one of the first actions that is taken when looking for a missing person is to track the location of their smartphone. However, when reporters asked the Wakayama Prefectural Police on whether they tracked the location of Yun's mobile phone in their search for him, they just refused to answer the question.
そうですね、ちょっとね、うちも気持ちはよくわかるんですけれども、一応その手続きしてくださいって言ってる手前ですね、そういうのなしの段階でお答えするというのもできません。
And we believe from the case of Hatta Yoichi, you guys are already very familiar of what the no comment or the I refuse to answer that question by the Japanese police means. This is rather peculiar, as when the reporters who visited Kujimoto in order to cover Yun's case went to a nearby smartphone operator and asked whether locating a smartphone, even if it has underwent roaming from another country, is possible. The employee said,
そうですね。本体と電波を受信してこっちのパソコンである程度の場所を見れるっていう仕組みになってるんで、電源が入ってたらとかにはどうしても最後は電源が、例えばドコモショップで電源切れたらここの場所が最後の場所ですよっていう形になったんですよ。
So this means that if the local Wakayama police cooperated with the operator company for Yun's phone, they could have indeed found the location of where his smartphone was last turned on. However, this did not happen. Now, we genuinely do not think that the Wakayama Prefectural Police did not locate Yun's smartphone because they just don't care about finding him. We believe that as with many aspects of the analog Japanese bureaucratic process, they just felt that the whole process, sending the waves from the smartphone body and computerized the location information of the phone, at least to a certain range, was just too much technology and technological jargon for them to deal with. Now, we actually think that such geolocating of the smartphone could actually be done with no problem at a city police department of Japan, such as the Tokyo Metropolitan Police. However, we have to keep in mind that the Shingu police station that was in charge of the search for the missing tourist Yun is one of the really small, countryside located police stations of the nation, probably even smaller than the Oita Beppu police station, meaning that they have probably never done such a thing, such as procuring the location information of a smartphone to the mobile phone operator, thus felt inclined to just conduct the search for Yun in the good old analog way of physically looking for him. So yeah, please be safe out there, and again, just move with at least some degree of caution if you are to ever plan on visiting the less populated regions of Japan to enjoy its beautiful landscape, and know that blanketed CCTV surveillance or high police competency is not something you should expect on a guaranteed basis, especially when traveling in the non-big city areas of the island nation. And please know that all of today's discussion means that eyewitness testimonies are even more pivotal in order to catch Hatta Yoichi at this point in time, as there is a high possibility that Hatta is moving very deliberately.
となると、やっぱ万引きとかしたりして食べていけばあとは置き引きとかっていうトイレに行くときに人が荷物を置いてきますよね。
And hiding specifically in locations where the chances of both public and private security camera installations are low. So if you ever see Hatta Yoichi when you're in Japan, please immediately call the Oita Beppu police station at 0977-21-2131 and report on his sighting.